Welcome to The Romantic Side of Suspense with Sarah Hamaker. In each episode, she'll talk with your favorite romantic suspense authors. They will take you behind the scenes of the writing process, giving excerpts from their writing, and share stories about their writing life.
The Peacemaker by Michele Chynoweth. Leif Mitchell is selected from his humble life as a horse rancher to become governor of Kentucky. Later nominated to run as the Republican candidate for President of the United States, he must face the powerful and narcissistic U.S. Democratic Senator Darren Richards of New York. Darren will stop at nothing to bring Leif down and win the election, causing Leif to reconsider his high-road approach to politics. When the campaigns get ugly and dangerous, First Lady hopeful Chessa Richards is faced with a tough decision. Should she attempt to preserve peace at all costs, protecting those who might become collateral damage as a result of the ensuing battle, in turn sacrificing her future and maybe even risking her own life? Should Chessa try to stop Leif from stooping to her husband's level, which may ruin Leif's candidacy but save his soul?
Hi, and welcome to this episode of The Romantic Side of Suspense. I'm your host, Sarah Hamaker, and I'm so glad you joined me. Today I have with me Michele Chynoweth.
She's an award-winning author of several modern-day Bible stories, and we're going to have a chance to talk with her more, especially about her romantic suspense, The Peacemaker. So welcome to my show, Michele.
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to be here.
So biblical stories. I think people forget how rich the Bible is in stories, right?
I think so. It kind of found me, the genre. I felt like I heard that still small voice to write my first novel, which was The Faithful One. And then I got picked up by a Christian traditional publisher, and they were doing a line of reimagining Bible stories in a modern-day way. And so then a friend suggested the story for The Peacemaker, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But it just blossomed, and I like to say it found me. I never set out to write contemporary novels based on Bible stories. I stick to the Old Testament. That's what I was originally called to write, and I feel like some of those stories in the Bible are a little bit tougher to comprehend than the New Testament. So I select characters or plot lines that follow Old Testament stories, and so far I've written on 4. But I do feel like the Bible is full of great stories. They're just a little, because they were written so long ago, a little hard to get the message or get what God's trying to tell us. So I take that story and bring it into a contemporary light so that readers can relate.
Yeah, but I love that. They are suspenseful stories.
Absolutely, and full of romance as well. I had a book signing. I'm going to throw this out there. I had a book signing at a Barnes & Noble, and I had this customer come up and start to read my book jackets, and he said, "Wait a minute, these aren't based on the Bible. They have sex in them." And I said, "Buddy, what Bible are you reading? Because the Bible does have everything in it, because we're all human beings, and they're stories about human beings, and all of the trials and tribulations we go through. So there is a lot of suspense in there. There are, a lot of heartache and challenges and triumphs, and it's all in there. It's a conglomeration of stories about us, and all that we face, and relationships, and full of suspense. One of my books is a thriller set in Las Vegas, based on Jonah. So it's like, I just feel like I'll never run out of material. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think just thinking of how, when we introduced Bible stories, our stories from the Bible, I should say, to our children, and how it dawned on me one time when they were young, and I was telling, I forget which Bible story, but telling them this story or reading it from a children's Bible, and I realized they don't know what happened, right? It's like they don't know what the ending is. Is Joseph going to be redeemed in Egypt? They don't know when they first hear it. And I think sometimes as adults, especially, those of us who are Christians, who have read the Bible and know it, we forget that when people hear it for the first time, it is suspenseful. There is that element of what is going to happen? How is God going to, use this for this person's good or for his own glory? And so I can see how you could get a lot of rich material from there, and put it in our modern day, because the Bible is timeless, and the truths that were true thousands of years ago are still true today. So I love that you're able to take those stories and give it that modern twist to kind of help us see things in a fresh way.
Right. It's just so full of adventure. And you're right. I have several children, and 3 of my own and 2 stepchildren. They're all grown now, but I think a lot of young adults think the Bible's just a bunch of stories about old people or old stories, that aren't relevant. But you just have to look at them in a new way and realize, we can relate. And they are adventurous. I mean, they're full of, there's murder in there, and adventure, and chaos, and like I said, relationships, and all types of things that we deal with. And I just feel called to retell those stories or reimagine them, fill in some of the gaps, with plot and characters and that type of thing, so that you're like, oh, that's what it's about, and that is a cool story. So, yes, full of adventure, I would say, suspense and romance.
Yeah, so, excuse me, how do you pick the location and the setting? Because obviously you're not setting these all in Israel. Israel, right? I mean, because you're bringing them into the modern world. So how do you decide where to put your romantic suspense novels?
I usually, like I said, the stories picked me. So the first one, the Faithful one, I was going through a lot of Job-like stuff at the time. Felt like I was losing or I was actually going through a divorce, and bitter divorce, and losing my business, and felt like I was losing my kids who were becoming teenagers, and my health was suffering. And I was in a really dark place when God called me to write that first novel. It took me 8 years to write it, and I came through on the other side, and just like Job, who's the guy who lost everything, and questioned God, why me? A lot of us do that. I mean, we all do that. We all suffer through challenges and loss, and so I felt called to set that one in Boston. So my modern character, my Job character, Seth Jacobs, lives in Boston. And I don't know why, although I had just visited Boston not too long before that. So with The Peacemaker, I set that in Kentucky. I have it's based on the story of David and Abigail in the first book of Samuel, and it focuses on that story, which takes up a few pages, but it follows a lot of the first book of Samuel, as in the David character. His name's Leif Mitchell. He's called by Samuel to run for Kentucky, governor of Kentucky. And the story follows along Chessa Richards, who is the Abigail character, and follows her story and goes back and forth between them until they finally meet. And then it continues in part 2 with following them together. So basically, Leif Mitchell is running for president of the United States. After he becomes governor, he's running for president against Abigail, or Chessa's husband, Senator Darren Richards, and they're running for president of the United States. And I set the book partially in New York. The senator is from New York, partially in Kentucky. Leif Mitchell lives in Kentucky. He's a horse rancher, kind of like modern-day shepherd, and also a country rock star. He's a budding rock star, but, David loved music, so that's the modern-day twist on that. And I picked Kentucky because of the horses, and I always loved horses as a girl, and I think a lot of women can relate to that.
I can relate, Michele.
I think girls love to read and love horses. There's just something about that. And I visited Kentucky. I was at the Kentucky Christian Writers Conference, actually. I was on the faculty, and I fell in love with Kentucky. So I have to say that's what brought that about. And the whole love of horses, and it just seemed to tie in. So I kind of let the settings, I just get inspired as I go along. I originally picked the storyline, or like I said, it's suggested to me. My friend suggested this story about, he said, after I wrote The Faithful One, and again, my publisher said, I want you to, I want to do this Reimagines line. And I said, what to write next to myself. And my friend said, Michele, you should write on Abigail, a novel on Abigail. And I, at the time, still resisting God somewhat, said, Abigail who? And he said, look her up. So I did, and I did the research on the first book of Samuel. And I realize now why he suggested her. So they say write what you know or write what you're passionate about. And there's a little bit about me or people I know, you fictionalize it. But The Faithful One, like I explained, was my Job trials. And The Peacemaker, at the time, I was going through a divorce. And I was married to, let's just say we didn't get along. We had a lot of problems in the marriage. But I felt like he was like Nabal at the time in the Bible, and if you're not familiar, read the story. But so that character is based on. We get along okay today. We co-parent, but my friend knew I was going through this bitter divorce, and all I was going through, and I could relate to Abigail. So the story blossomed, and yes, back to your setting question. So that's how that comes about.
Yes, I think it is fascinating. I've set some of my books, one in Fairfax area where I live in Virginia, and I also love the mountains in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. So some of my other books are set there, but a lot of them are just set where I live. I mean, I like where I live. I think I live in a pretty exciting place right outside of Washington D.C. So I enjoy that, but I can see the appeal of, setting it in a different locality. And again, it's what the story needs, right?
Right.
You wanted horse farms, and yes, Kentucky is the place for that kind of a thing. And I think it's really important to make sure that your characters are in a setting that is authentic for that story.
Right. So the story for me comes first, and then the characters develop, and the setting it all happens simultaneously, but setting is important. So for The Runaway Prophet, I set that in Las Vegas because of the nature of the story based on Jonah, about a guy who tries to run from God's call, and in this case, he's called to work with the FBI in Vegas. It's a thriller, like you said, Bible full of suspense, and Jonah is very suspenseful, and anyway, called to, there's a radical terrorist group out there, kind of like ISIS in America, and anyway, Las Vegas seemed to be a good place for that. And then The Jealous Son, my latest novel, I set in Arizona, and it starts off in the Grand Canyon, and it's based on Cain and Abel, and loosely based on, I have two adult sons, and they have that sibling rivalry. And my husband and I were hiking in the Grand Canyon, and I said, I wish I would have brought my kids out here. And he said, are you kidding? They would have fallen off the cliff and it just sparked that story, and like I ran with it. So
yeah,
that's how that comes about.
I know. I love those little moments where you have that aha, kind of, I can set, or insight into a character or something like that. That's always, I think, just one of the fun things about being a writer of fiction. Those little inspirations come from all over the place, so it's really great to have them. So I think we have time for one more question. So I'd love to know, what is one of your favorite ways to connect with readers?
We could talk all day, right, Sarah?
Mm-hmm.
I love speaking. I miss the in-person with the pandemic, but hopefully that'll be over soon. I love coming to speak, but I'll do it over Zoom too. Doing author Q&As, visiting, with my readers, interacting, and talking about my books, which is why I'm very grateful to be on your podcast. To just, talk to readers. I love hearing from readers. Emails or reviews. When somebody says, and they have before, when they read The Peacemaker, wow, I used to be married to, I'm married to the same guy I used to be married to. Can we talk? A young lady came up to me and took my hand after I had a book talk on The Peacemaker, and it really touched my heart, like that book resonated with her and helped her. Or somebody reading The Faithful One said, I went back to church after reading your book. I felt like I needed to reconnect with my faith again. So, like, there are messages of hope and faith and love and courage in The Peacemaker. Definitely courage. Abigail has to summon up courage to make the peace between David and Nabal. And I won't give too much away, but you'll hear the reading. But they meet on the horse ranch, and it's kind of exciting. So, yeah, I feel like I love connecting with readers in any way possible. I love hearing from my readers. So please reach out if you read my books, and let me know, what you took away from that. It's the biggest reward we can get, I think. It's not about the sales and the money. It's about connecting.
Yeah, no, I agree, Michele. It is so wonderful that those of us who write Christian fiction, that we can weave those bits of God into it, and that that can help a reader, or just encourage them, or just give them a great way to spend an afternoon. I mean, I think that's a gift we can give our readers as well. Doesn't have to be, really high and lofty goals. If a reader reads my book and they just have enjoyed themselves, I think, for me, I'm like, yeah, that's good, because it's a good, clean book, and it tells them something about God, whether they recognize it or not. So I love, that connection with readers that we're privileged to have through our books.
Right. It's more of a challenge as writers, as authors. But I feel like we are called to a higher calling of getting God's message across, and it can still be entertaining. It doesn't have to be, preachy or boring. It can be through romantic suspense, a beach read even. So, and I feel like that's how my books are. I call them edgy Christian fiction or edgy inspirational fiction. They're, action-packed and fast-paced read that you can read on the beach and get engrossed, and yet still walk away with feeling a little bit transformed or inspired.
Right.
So that's my goal. That's our goal.
That's a great goal, Michele. And we are out of time, so thank you so much for being on my show.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
You have been listening to The Romantic Side of Suspense. I've been talking with Michele Chynoweth about her book, The Peacemaker. Keep listening for an excerpt from that book now.
Now an excerpt from The Peacemaker by Michele Chynoweth. How can you not want your own husband to win? Leaf was still wary. You would lose becoming the First Lady of the United States, living in the White House. None of that matters if it comes at the price of knowing for the rest of my life that my husband is a big fraud. But you're not sure what will happen with the electorate or any of this, one way or the other. That's true, but if you win without engaging in this battle, you won't have to live with the burden on your conscience of having harmed innocent victims as a result, or worse yet, having won out of spite and revenge. You do believe in the truth of the Bible verse, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord," right? Leaf slowly nodded, still eyeing her warily, not sure where her discourse was headed. That's why I said earlier that I believe your faith in God will lead you to realize that what I'm saying is true. If you believe in God's will, in God's justice, in God's plan, then you will leave this all in His hands. Let's say I agree not to pursue this, not to call your reporter friend again. If your husband has the temper you say he does, won't you be at risk once he finds out that you've betrayed him by visiting me? I'm afraid of that, yes, but I also have to leave it all up to God. Chessa sighed and looked up to the sky, which had turned indigo, allowing what seemed like a million stars to shine. Why didn't you just leave him? I ask myself that every day. Believe me, I've prayed about it over and over, and I just haven't felt it was the right thing to do. I keep praying for God's will, and I guess secretly hoping God will change him. Meanwhile, at least I have friends who help me deal with it all. They arrived at the stables, which were lit up from within. Leaf's men, including Shiloh, had already taken care of their horses for the night and had disappeared. Even though it was dark now, Chessa could make out the silhouette of a man standing a few yards from the stables. Chessa saw it was her bodyguard, standing with his arms crossed, and waved to him. She watched him nod. It was too dark to make out his expression. He's probably mad at me, she thought. Oh well, he'll get over it. Horses neighed and whinnied their hellos to Sunny and Sally as Leaf and Chessa dismounted. Chessa watched as Leaf lovingly brushed the horses after removing their tack and then gave them each half a carrot and an apple he had cut up. Chessa rubbed Sunny's velvety soft, wheat-colored muzzle. I could do this every day, she said, and then laughed. It was such a thrill galloping down that hill like that, although, to be honest, I thought I was going to die for a minute there. Leaf started to laugh too. You should have seen yourself when you got off that horse. Hey, I didn't look that bad, did I? You looked like you had just been on the most terrifying thrill ride of your life. And no, you didn't look bad. You looked beautiful. Chessa blushed and tried to avert her gaze from his, but Leaf stepped closer to her. Their eyes locked for a few moments. Chessa suddenly looked away, feeling desire run hot through her entire body. I'm sorry, Mrs. Richards. Please, call me Chessa. Chessa. She liked how he said her name. Don't get sidetracked, she reminded herself. You came here on important business, remember? I shouldn't have said that. Forgive me for being so forward. That's okay. So, Leaf, do we have a deal? He backed a step away from her and squinted his eyes, thinking. She watched as conflicting emotions contorted his face. He frowned. I'm sorry, Chessa. I want to believe you, but I can't agree to your request. I need to win this election. I need to bring your husband down. But you could still win even if you don't. I don't see how. Besides, I'd be condoning your father-in-law's company and human egg trafficking. But two wrongs don't make a right. You don't know the whole truth at this point. I know enough. But I thought you were starting to trust me. I thought you were starting to like me. I thought we just shared something. Her thoughts were left unspoken. Instead, she said, I thought that you were a good man, but you're just as bad as my husband. Chessa wanted to take back her words, said in desperation, but it was too late. Leaf raised his voice in indignation. You don't even know me. I don't know why I listened to you this long. Talk about truth? Maybe you need to face your own truth. You want to divorce your husband, and yet you're here defending him. You say you're really trying to protect me, but what you really want me to do is in his and your best interests. If any sane, rational person looked objectively at what you're asking of me, they'd say I'd lost my marbles if I were to agree to it. None of this makes sense. You're right, it doesn't. Chessa was starting to have doubts herself. Maybe I shouldn't have come here. I thought I was trying to do the right thing, look out for the greater good. I guess I was mistaken. At the same time, Chessa also felt humbled by what Leaf had said. Even though his words were harsh, she knew he was right. She felt like she just had a light bulb moment. I really do need to face my own truth. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time I face reality, win or lose. It's time I look at my own life and make some changes instead of waiting to see what happens. I need to find out who I am. Not who Chessa, the wife of Darren Richards, U.S. Senator and presidential candidate, is. But of course, you probably think I'm just saying that now to get you to agree with me and drop the story. Leaf remained quiet for a few moments. It's late. I think you better go.
Thanks for listening to The Romantic Side of Suspense with Sarah Hamaker. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. You can sign up to receive notifications of upcoming podcasts and listen to previous editions at sarahhamakerfiction.com.